Most of you already know Rev Sherry. She is an instructor here at Creative Living University. She's a frequent guest speaker here, beloved guest speaker here. And to coin a phrase from another old 60s song, where Reverend Sherry goes, love grows. Where love grows, Reverend Sherry goes. You know what I'm talking about. Anyone else old enough to remember that song? Yes. Of course. Because she is the essence of love and principle and compassion and beauty and wisdom. And we're just thrilled to have her here today as our guest speaker. Would you please give a warm welcome for Reverend Sherry McCreary?
Thank you so much. Good morning. You guys know the drill. Yes, thank you so much. I didn't know you guys were mother and daughter until today. No, how wonderful that is. It reminds me that about 6 or 7 months before I moved to Phoenix, I was invited to speak at a religious science church one Sunday, and my daughter was invited to be the singer for the service. And we have served together, speaking and singing over the years, and we were just really thrilled to have the opportunity to serve together again. And so she asked me when she accepted the offer, what did I want her to sing? Was there anything special? And I said, Everything Must Change. And she said, wow, that was quick. You didn't even think about it. And I said, I know. I don't even know where that came from. It just popped out. Everything Must Change is one of my favorite songs that she sings. And I said, but let me think about it. Maybe Spirit has something else down the road. But for now, everything must change. And so, that was one of those things that make you go, Because as we went along over the next couple of weeks, my daughter decided that she was going to move out of state. She wasn't sure then where she was going to move. We were living in California. And she was going to move out of state. For 5 years before then, I had shared a house with her and her 2 little dogs, my little grand dogs, Yogi and Sweet Pea. And so all of a sudden, she's talking about moving out of state, and which was going to kind of break our family up and break our household up. And then a couple of weeks later, little Yogi, who had been diagnosed with congestive heart failure, took a turn for the worst, and he had to be put down. So that was another real blow for us. And so now I'm thinking about, okay, well, I'm just going to maintain the status quo. You know, that's what we want to do when change comes up. I'm going to maintain the status quo. I'm going to keep this big house because this is where I have all my classes. I have classes every week, and this is where I do all these things, and I'm just going to rent out some rooms and become a landlord and have these people coming in. Doesn't matter that it didn't work when I tried this before my daughter moved here. It's going to work this time because I'm going to stay here. I'm not moving. But I realized that the change was really, really affecting me. And so I did what we do. The universal response to change, is freak out. So, right? So I just freaked out. And I do freak out differently than most people. Instead of freaking out, I freak in. So I turn inward and I get really quiet and really still. So I took to my bed and I watched Family Feud. I got some fans over here. I watched Family Feud as often as I could. I watched marathons of Family Feud. Family Feud. Every day I was in the bed watching Family Feud. Because, in addition to freak out, other universal responses to change, major change, are resistance, depression, grieving, wallowing. Sometimes all at the same time. That's when it gets really interesting. And so the more I went through, I cycled through all of those, the more I watched Family Feud. And so one day my daughter said to me, you know what, you really aren't dealing with this change thing, with this move thing. You haven't even started packing. You aren't doing anything. All you do is stay in bed and watch Family Feud. And I said, what makes you think that? What makes you think I'm not dealing? And she said, well, maybe it's because every time I pass your room, I hear dun, 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 dun. You know that music for Family Feud? Those of you who watch it, I know you guys know. So I said, that just happens to be on when you're passing my room. It's not that I'm watching it all the time. But I noticed that I got so, when I would hear her coming up the steps or coming down the hall, I would change the channel. And I knew then that she was on to something, that I was really in that place of wallowing. And when we get into that place of wallowing, I began to realize that, okay, how long are you going to do this? You know, how's this working for you? So one day I'm lying there watching Family Feud, and the question came up, and somebody answered the question, hijacked. And it hit me like a bolt of lightning. Hijacked. That's how I was feeling. Hijacked. All these feelings I was having, I was being hijacked by this change. Hijacked by all the things that were shifting in my life. Hijacked was like, you know, hijack means to seize, to take control of, to take over, sometimes with force. And, you know, that's how change can feel when we didn't initiate the change. When somebody else or something else initiated the change, initiated a loss, we feel hijacked by that. That was such a good description for me of how I was really feeling and how I was dealing. I was dealing like I was being hijacked. Because at that point, we become victims. We become victims in our own mind, victims of whatever is going on. And so that's when I realized that I'm being hijacked by these changes rather than being embraced by the changeless. I was being hijacked by these changes rather than being embraced by the changeless, rather than embracing the changeless. And so that brought me to my topic today, which is hijacked or embraced. It also brings me to what's going on in our world today. The feeling that I've been having over the past few months for myself and in dealing with other people is that feeling of being hijacked. It feels like we're being hijacked, like we've been hijacked. When we think about all the things that are going on, all the changes that are happening so fast, things are happening so fast you don't even remember how things used to be sometimes. Everything seems different. The world seems to be spinning. You know, that old Broadway show, Stop the World, I Want to Get Off. That's how I've been feeling sometimes. And that old familiar feeling came up like hijacked. That's how I'm feeling. And so many people that I talk to, so many of you, so many of us, so many people that I know, so many of my clients are constantly talking to me about their feelings, and the feeling is the same. We feel hijacked. And we get hijacked by what we perceive to be duality rather than embracing what we know is oneness. We get hijacked by all the stuff that's going on, by all the chaos, the apparent chaos, the divisiveness, the destruction, all the confusion, and all that stuff. We get hijacked by all of that because we forget that there's only one life, one mind, one presence, one love, one breath. There's only one source, and it is the source of us all. And so when we can keep bringing ourselves back to that there's only one. There's only one power. There's only one presence. There's only one breath, and that breath is always breathing me. It's always breathing each of us. When we keep coming back to that truth, then we can start to embrace that truth and let go of the being hijacked by the changes and the confusion and the duality, the apparent duality, and be embraced by oneness. When we keep moving back to the oneness that we know. That gets to be easier said than done. It gets to be easier said than done because so much is going on. But what we have to keep in mind that we have to continue to not be hijacked by the facts and be embraced by the truth. Fact, yes, there's violence. Fact, yes, there are natural disasters. Fact, yes, there's confusion. Fact, yes, there's divisiveness. Fact, yes, there's a lot of chaos. Fact, all the stuff, there's suffering. Fact, yes, there's destruction. Truth, there's only one. There's only one life. There's only one power. There's only one presence. And it is in the midst of everything that's going on. It is in the midst of everything that's going on. And that one life, that oneness that is my very life and the life of each of us here this day. And so when we can embrace the truth, then we don't get hijacked by the facts. We don't get hijacked by the facts because the facts are always changing. Truth never changes. It is changeless. God never changes. It is changeless. And so we keep coming back to what we know. We keep coming back to what we believe. We keep coming back to what we know. We keep coming back to what we know. Let's take a breath. As we keep coming back and allow ourselves to be embraced and to embrace oneness, to embrace truth. We get to the place where we do that by beginning to shift our focus. Shifting our focus from duality. Shifting our focus to not seeing duality, but seeing diversity. There's diversity in oneness. Oneness does not mean sameness. Oneness does not mean sameness. Wouldn't it be boring if we were all the same? Wouldn't it be boring if we all looked the same, if we all acted the same, if we all talked the same, we all dressed the same? Wow. Spirit cannot be that boring. It cannot. It has to express. It is always looking for ways to express, and it expresses to each one of us according to our own uniqueness. And so we applaud that, whether it's somebody we agree with or not, whether it's someone that we even like or not. It's God is still expressing. That oneness is still expressing. They're all a part of the one. There's only one of us here. There's only one of us here. One life, one presence, one power, one mind. And when we can shift our focus to oneness, then that's how we start to embrace. Embracing means to wrap one's arms around, to hug, to accept and support willingly and enthusiastically, to welcome with open arms. That's embracing. So we welcome with open arms oneness. We welcome with open arms our diversity. And not only in this room, everywhere we go, we see diversity. If we can start looking through the eyes of diversity rather than the eyes of duality, we start to see the world differently. How we see the world is how we live in the world. How we see the world is how we live in the world. We live in the world as we see it. And we see it according to our own mental equivalence. If we want to see something different, we have to develop a different mental equivalence. If you wonder what your mental equivalence is like, then look at what your experiences are in your life. Look at what your experiences are, because we cannot demonstrate beyond mental equivalence. We cannot demonstrate beyond our consciousness. We have to have the consciousness for whatever it is that we desire. Otherwise, we can't demonstrate that. The same is true for the things we don't desire. We have the consciousness. We have to have the consciousness for it to demonstrate those things. The mental equivalence to demonstrate those things. I invite you to read mental equivalence in the Science of Mind textbook. That chapter is almost all yellow in my old Science of Mind textbook that's falling apart, because I have read it so many times and I have highlighted it so many times, and I still read it, and I still am reminded that I have to have the mental equivalent of what I want to demonstrate in my life. And the things that are demonstrating in my life are because of my mental equivalence. And so it's real simple. You know, what we are thinking, that's what we're bringing unto us. So shifting our focus so that we can have the mental equivalent, and when we have the mental equivalent of something, we are vibrating at the level of that thing. And when we want to vibrate higher, we raise our thoughts, we raise our vibration, and we start to attract to us things that are operating at that same vibratory level, because everything has a vibration. And so when we start to to think higher, to act higher, to speak higher, then we start to attract things that are operating on a higher vibration. This works in our personal lives. It also works for the planet. It also works for the world. It also works everywhere. It's the law. It works everywhere for everybody. And so when we see things happening out in the world, it may not be our own specific mental equivalence, but it's the mental equivalent of the world community, of our own community. Yes, and it's called race consciousness. It's race consciousness. And so when we start to work on our own consciousness, our own individual consciousness, then that's when we can start to make a change in the world. We start to work on our own consciousness. We start to shift our focus, to supplant negative thinking with new thoughts, to supplant an old thought with a new thought, to replace a negative thought with a positive thought. And I was saying at the first service that someone had said to me recently that they were having a problem accepting the positive thinking of science of mind. And my response to that is science of mind is not a positive thinking philosophy. It's an affirmative thinking philosophy. It's an affirmative thinking philosophy. It's not new agey stuff. It's ancient thought, ancient wisdom. And so when we start to supplant negative thoughts with affirmative thoughts, affirming that which we desire, affirming that which we wish to attain the mental equivalence of, that's when things begin to change. Not because we're thinking airy-fairy positive thinking. We're thinking the truth. We're going to the truth. We're accepting and knowing the truth, and we're willing to live the truth, that there is only one life, there is only one power, there is only one presence. We start to look at oneness and recognize that there is oneness in diversity, and that there's diversity and oneness. Ernest Holmes calls it multiplicity and unity and multiplicity. And we start to recognize that, and we can move forward with that. So another way of supplanting our thoughts with new thoughts is using what I call the golden key method. Emmett Fox wrote a little book many years ago called The Golden Key. I love that little book because it only has 6 pages. That's probably why I love it. So easy to read. And he says there's one simple rule there. One simple rule. Take your mind off the problem, no matter what it is, and put your mind on God. Take a breath. Take your mind off the problem, no matter what it is, and put your mind on God. I don't care if you name the problem illness. I don't care if you name it financial problems. I don't care if you name it relationship problems. I don't care if you name it war. I don't care if you name it fear. Whatever you name it, take your mind off that and bring it to God. And keep doing that. Take your mind off the problem, bring it back to God. Take your mind off the problem, bring it back to God. You can do that by affirmation. You can do that just by saying God. Just by remembering that God is always right where we are. Always right here, right now. Always. We're always in that present because it's omnipresent. And so when we can do that with our thoughts, then that's how we begin to shift things, shift our focus. Watching our words, minding what we speak of. Sufi master Hafiz says that the word you speak becomes the house you live in. That's powerful. The word you speak becomes the house you live in. The word you speak becomes the house you live in. If you don't want to live in duality, don't speak it. If you don't want to live in anger and hatred, don't speak it. Don't speak about how you hate somebody. Don't speak about anger. Don't speak about destruction or being destructive. Don't speak about the things that you don't want to experience because our words are creative. And so that's what it means, that the word we speak becomes the house we live in. And the words that we speak with passion and a lot of feeling really become the house we live in. Because the more feelings that we put into our words, the more creative our words become. If we are praying, God is all there is, I am one with God, God is good all the time, that's not very creative. But then we say, this world is going to in a handbasket. or things are so bad today, or I really hate whoever, or whatever. All that feeling going into that makes it creative, because there's so much feeling going there. And we create not only with our thoughts and our words, but the feeling that goes into it. And so keeping that in mind, we have to mind our thoughts. We have to mind our words. We have to mind our actions also. I'm just reminded that in talking about oneness throughout this month, there were some questions that came up for the panel discussion that we had a couple of Sundays ago, and Reverend Michelle has said that there were some questions that she didn't get to in the last panel discussion, and she addressed some last week. And a couple of them I looked over this past week. I'll see if I can recall them. One of them was, how has the Second Amendment become so misinterpreted? That was one question. Another one was, how do we maintain a mindset that God is good when there are killings and floods and impotent government officials? And another one was, does our world have to break down in order to have a breakthrough for healing and wholeness? Good questions. Let's take a breath on those. I didn't answer the first question during the first service. It kind of slipped by me. But, you know, we interpret things according to our own consciousness. And so when you're talking about interpreting the Second Amendment, it is according to our own consciousness that we interpret things. So when we are in a consciousness of fear, then we interpret things as needing to have things to protect us, needing to have weapons to protect us, needing to have guns or whatever to protect us. And that's when we feel a need for that much protection and defense, is because we're operating out of fear. We're operating from a place of fear. And so when we are in that kind of fear, we have to barricade ourselves behind a wall of things that will protect us. When honestly, the only thing that can protect us is the source of our being. The source of our being. God is our protection. There is no weapon that can protect us. There's no person that can protect us. The 91st Psalm says that he who dwelleth under the shadow of the Almighty, he who dwelleth in the secret place of the Most High shall abide under the shadow of the Almighty. He who dwelleth in the secret place of the Most High shall abide under the shadow of the Almighty. And so when we dwell in the secret place of the Most High God, when we dwell in oneness with God, then we abide, which means that we live. Just as dwelling means that we live, we abide under the shadow of God, under the shadow of the Almighty. And so that's where we want to abide, in oneness. We want to be in that place of oneness, aligning ourselves with Spirit, aligning ourselves with what we know to be truth, that God is indeed all there is. God indeed is our very life. That we want to keep in mind, always, always. And so looking at whether or not we're breaking down for healing and wholeness, the world is breaking down for healing and wholeness. Ernest Holmes says that the perception of wholeness is the consciousness of healing. I love that. The perception of wholeness is the consciousness of healing. When we can perceive wholeness, that's the consciousness of healing, not for healing, but of healing. We can be in that place of healing when we can perceive wholeness. And so recognizing that wholeness already is, the only thing that ever needs to be healed is our sense of separation from God. The only thing that needs to be healed is our sense of separation from God. And when we are feeling separate from God, then we are feeling separate from each other. We move into them and us consciousness. We move into either or consciousness rather than both and consciousness. And so when we are feeling separate, again, we're feeling separate from each other. We even separate from ourselves. So when we can move into that place of knowing that the movement for wholeness and healing is from the inside out. It doesn't happen from outside in. I had an experience many years ago. I had a dental procedure where, it's kind of gross, but they had to bore a hole through my gum. And after the dentist did this, I asked if I could take a look at it. And when he said, "You sure you want to see it?" And I said, "Yes." And he showed me, and he gave me a mirror. I looked at it, and there was a hole that you could push a pencil through in my gum. And I just kind of observed that. And then I went through the weeks of the healing process. And I would look at that place in the mirror as often as I could, and I saw it closing in. And that's when I really began to understand the perception of wholeness is the consciousness of healing. Because nothing was happening from the outside. All of the healing was happening from the inside. That hole was filling in from the inside, not because the doctor did something to the outside of it. That's how healing happens for us. It happens from the inside out. As within, so without. When we start to heal within, it starts to manifest in our world. It starts to manifest on the outer. So as within, so without. As within, so without. The perception of wholeness is the consciousness of healing. What we have to do is to give up our attachment to what healing looks like. We get pretty attached to what healing looks like because we know what we want it to look like. So what I have to say to you is that healing isn't pretty. It really isn't. In fact, it's ugly, and it's messy. Think about a surgical scar and how it turns purple and red and black and blue, and then it may get infected, and then it has a little pussy stuff on it, and then it does all that. That doesn't mean it's not healing, right? It doesn't mean it's not healing. It just means it's messy while it's going through the process, while wholeness is revealing itself. The wholeness is already within us. And so that's what healing is looking like out here in our world today. It's beginning to get messy and ugly and scary. And that doesn't mean that healing isn't happening. And so the other thing I want you to keep in mind is to keep holding to the vision of oneness. Knowing that there's oneness and diversity, be the oneness that you want to see. My teacher, Michael Beckwith, used to always say, pain pushes until vision pulls. Pain pushes until vision pulls. Pain pushes us. Right now, the world seems to be operating from pain. We're being pushed to do this and pushed to do that and pushed to respond this way. You hit me, I hit you back without thinking about it. I'm being pushed. And so we're being pushed by the pain. But when we have a vision of oneness, our vision of oneness can pull us into a place of peace. Our vision of oneness can pull us into a place of love. Our vision of oneness can pull us into a place of unity. A vision of oneness can pull us into that place of oneness. And so I invite you to be the oneness that you want to see. Be the change that you want to see is not just a trite phrase. We have to be it in order to experience it, in order to attract it. So be the oneness that you want to see and recognize that pain pushes until vision pulls, and that in your life, you're not being pushed by the pain. You're being pulled by the vision for your life. You're being pulled by a vision for living a higher life. You're being pulled by the vision of truth, pulled by the vision of love, pulled by the vision of peace, pulled by the vision of oneness, pulled by the vision of God at the center of everything. That's where healing takes place. That's where wholeness begins to reveal itself, when we allow the vision to pull us. And so when we allow ourselves to be embraced by oneness, allow ourselves to embrace oneness, let go of the being hijacked, and recognize when you're being hijacked by change and hijacked by duality and hijacked by all that stuff that's not real. Take a deep breath and bring ourselves into that place where we're being embraced. We're being embraced by spirit. We are embracing spirit. We are embracing oneness. We are embracing the truth. We are embracing the all that is. And we are living the highest life possible. Let yourself be embraced. Let yourself embrace oneness. God bless you. Let's turn within in this moment. Just taking a deep breath. Just recognizing that there's but one life, one power, one mind, one breath. That breath is breathing me right now. That breath is breathing each of us right here and right now. I choose to call this God, but by any other name. Whatever name we call it, it's the same. It is the source of our being, that divine intelligence that is everywhere present, that is always operating, that is in the midst of everything, no matter what the appearance may be. And so from this place of awareness that this oneness, this onlyness that is God, is my very life, and it is the life of each of us here this day. And so just knowing this truth, I speak the word for each of us here this day, speaking a word of wholeness, knowing that in our lives we perceive wholeness. We develop the consciousness of healing, and healing begins to happen for each of us on every level of our being. As we perceive wholeness, all else falls away. All the old stuff, the old patterns, the old beliefs, ideas of separation fall away. They fall away. And as they do so, it creates a space for the truth to come in, the qualities of God in our lives, for peace and love and joy and balance and harmony and forgiveness and compassion. Creates a space for oneness. And as oneness comes into our lives, into our experience, healing is taking place on every level of our being. How grateful I am to know this truth, to speak this word of healing for each of us. As a circle of prayer is being opened, I pause momentarily so that you may speak the names of anyone you'd like held in prayer. You may speak their names silently or aloud, but you may speak them now. And so for all those whose names were spoken here this day, I'm just knowing that God is right where each one of them is. In the midst of everything going on, God is. This prayer goes out to anyone on this planet needing a prayer this day, knowing that God is in the midst of every situation, every circumstance, just as God is in the midst of every situation and circumstance in our lives. I bless Reverend Michelle and Reverend Lonnie and the other ministers and the spiritual life coaches who are on retreat today, just knowing that God is there in the presence of God. They've been practicing the presence of God all of this weekend, knowing that they are blessed, just as we are blessed right here in this place, and we are blessings. And so we take these blessings out into the universe, just allowing our light to shine, allowing our consciousness to heal. I'm knowing indeed that all is well, and I just give great, great thanks. As I say, thank you, Father, Mother God. Thank you, Infinite Presence. Thank you, Divine Mother. I'll just allow it to be now. And so it is. Amen.